Hi guys, so I want to show you the final step here, final steps for our Mount Rushmore transformation. Here are my 4 heads that have already had a texture applied, so hopefully you've already done the texture video. Technically you could do it in any order, but if you look at my layers panel over here, you'll see that I have a lot of layers at this point. I have, for each layer, I have a texture. So let's look at MJ here. So for each layer now, I have a texture applied, and I also have 2 adjustment layers that are adjusting the colors. Okay, so here is MJ with no adjustments. Here is MJ with his texture applied, and then here are the 2 adjustments, one for color and one for light and dark. Okay, this is kind of the look we're going for, which is that all of the heads are made of the same material. All of these heads are made of stone. All of them are part of the mountain. So I shouldn't see any colors besides the colors that are in the stone. So in other words, originally, my Dr. Fauci has a, there's his whole face. My Dr. Fauci has a bright red Washington Nationals mask on, but Mount Rushmore, of course, is made of stone, right? So I need to make it look like not only is his face textured to match the stone, but it is also colored to match the stone and lightened or darkened to match the stone appropriately. Joe Exotic over here, this is a really poor quality photo. I should probably swap it for a better one, but it's a good challenging one for the moment. Here's my Joe Exotic. His original face looked like that. I added the texture, and then I adjusted the color. That was okay, but the problem is these black sunglasses and the darker areas on his face really don't look right, okay? If I turn that off, you'll see, even if Roosevelt here has dark hair, it's still going to be stone colored in the final version, okay? Or in this, if this is supposed to look like a stone sculpture, the hair should still be stone colored, even though in reality it's coming from a photo. So I've adjusted the tones so that some of those black areas don't show up quite as much. And then lastly, when I look at MJ here, we know MJ has a naturally darker skin color than Joe Exotic, to say the very least. So when I put the texture on and change the color, he looks a lot darker than the stone around him. So regardless of what skin tone your original heads have, you're going to want to adjust them so that they look more like they're made of stone instead of made of skin, okay? So I'm going to show you how to do that. That can be a little bit tricky. So just like last time, I'm going to delete all of my layers that I've done in advance, like so. So what I have now are just 4 heads that have a texture applied at the moment, okay? We're going to talk about adjusting colors in Photoshop and how to control where those colors go. So the tool that we used for adjusting colors in Photoshop is down here at the bottom of my layers, specifically this black and white circle down here, which creates what's called an adjustment layer. Okay, adjustment layers are the way that we adjust colors in Photoshop, always, always, always. Adjustment layers are amazing because they allow us to control exactly where certain changes are going or exactly where my adjustments are affecting. I'm going to demonstrate that using this hue and saturation layer. Okay, so if I click I'm on my very top layer at the moment. I'm clicking my adjustment layer button, which is this black and white circle down at the bottom. Okay, and I'm going to choose hue saturation. Okay, hue saturation is one of the most useful for adjusting colors. Okay, there are 3 components. I'm only going to bother with 2 of them. The bottom one, lightness, is not particularly useful for us right now. What it does is it makes colors look more white or more black. It's not a very realistic effect, and it's not super useful for us right now. So leave lightness alone, don't touch it. Saturation is what you can think of as intensity of the color, okay? So if I turn this down, the colors become less and less intense until they turn completely black and white. So if I turn saturation all the way down, it makes my picture completely gray. There are no colors here whatsoever. It's all just shades of gray, okay? If I turn the saturation up, I can have a little bit of color. Back to the middle will be like a natural color. And if I turn it up, the colors will become more and more intense, okay? So think of saturation as the intensity of the color. If I turn it up, the colors get more intense. Turn it down, the colors get more gray, okay? I'm going to turn this up for now just so you can see. The hue adjuster is at the top here. And what the hue adjustment does is changes the colors in terms of where they fit on the color spectrum. So if I turn this down, stuff that was previously blue is now like greenish yellow. Stuff that was previously sort of a warmer gray tones has turned blue, okay? As I adjust this hue slider, it radically changes the color, all right? It's gonna make that sky in particular go through all the different shades of the rainbow, okay? I'll get into more specifics later about exactly what I'm going to do with this, okay? I want to introduce another of the adjustments, the other one that we really care about. And again, to get to my adjustments, it's right down here at the bottom, this little icon right here, this black and white circle. So what I did before was hue saturation. I'm not going to use that right now. What I'm going to use next is levels. Okay, so these are the two we're going to use for today, hue saturation and levels. There are lots of adjustments in here. Some of them are really useful, some of them are less useful, but hue saturation we're going to use all the time, and levels we're going to use all the time. So hue saturation is sort of our main adjustment for changing colors. Levels is the main adjustment for changing light and dark. Okay, so here's what levels does. If I open up levels, here is my levels adjustment. So the levels tool looks like this. This is called a histogram. A histogram is a visual representation of all of the light and dark areas of your picture. Okay, so at the moment, what this is showing me is that I have some really dark areas. I don't really have any white areas in this picture at the moment, but there's a lot of stuff that's kind of like middle gray tones. Okay, if I want to make my picture darker, all I have to do is grab this middle gray point right here that's right in the center. It's a sort of gray looking square here. If I want to make my picture darker, I just grab this point and shift it to the right. Okay, and the effect will be it takes more of the picture and makes it dark. Okay, it doesn't really change the whitest parts, but it changes kind of everything else. If I want to make the whole picture lighter, I just do the opposite. I just grab this middle point here and slide it over to the left. Okay, so very simply, slide this to the right, makes it darker. Sliding it to the left makes it lighter. Okay, I can also adjust the end points here, the white point and the black point, but generally speaking, you don't really want to mess with those too much. If I shift this to the right, what it ends up doing is actually taking details that were previously dark and it just turns them to black. So I'm actually losing information. So generally speaking, I want to keep the black point over here and the white point over here, but adjust just the middle gray point. Okay. The other main thing that I'm interested in is down here, and this is what's called the output levels. The output levels are down here at the bottom, and what they do is they control what is the darkest part and what is the lightest part of my picture. So currently, the darkest thing in my picture is black, and that is right here, Joe Exotic's sunglasses. Okay, the whitest part of my picture is white, and that would be like the highlights, like in here, there's not as much white, but there are a few areas that have a few bright white highlights, like right here. Okay. What I want to do, I want to reduce the amount of black. I want to make it so that nothing in my picture is super, super black. The way that I would do that is right here. I'll take this black point and slide it over. What that does is it makes it so that those areas that were previously black are no longer black. It will make it so the darkest part of my picture will correspond with whatever I line up this black point with. So if I put it all the way to the right, my picture turns white. If I put it in the middle, it means that my darkest thing in my picture is now like medium gray. Okay? If I put it all the way to the left, it gives me a full spectrum picture, full light to dark. Okay? That's good for now. Now, what am I going to do with this information? Hue saturation and levels. So I'm going to use those two tools to adjust the colors of each of my four heads. Okay, I'm going to start with Fauci. His is probably the easiest one, and then I'm going to show you how to do the others. Once you know how to do one, you should be able to do all of them, really. So you don't need to watch this entire video unless you just want to. All right. I'm starting to lose my voice a little bit, so I apologize if I sound a bit like a frog, but hey, it is what it is. Let's adjust Fauci's colors, shall we? So I have selected Dr. Fauci's layer, okay? And I'm going to click my layer mask button down here, and I'm going to choose Hue Saturation. Now, as soon as I do this, it's going to make weird things happen to my picture, but that's okay. I'm going to click Hue Saturation, and you'll notice immediately my texture got messed up. Okay, it's not a problem. Because what I'm going to do, I'm going to right-click on my Hue Saturation that I just created. This is it right here. And I'm going to choose Clipping Mask. When I do that, you'll see that everything goes back to normal. Okay, let me do that again. Delete that layer. So I have my Fauci selected. I'm clicking Adjustment, Hue Saturation. Boom. Right-click, Clipping Mask. Okay, so I just right-clicked on my Hue Saturation layer and choose Clipping Mask. If you look over here, you'll see that both my texture layer, which is layer 2, and my Hue Saturation that I just created are both clipped to Dr. Fauci. So you can see this little, these little arrows that are pointing down, and that shows me that these two layers right here are only affecting his layer. Okay? So now, as I adjust my hue over here, you'll see that it doesn't affect any of the picture except for the good doctor. Okay? If I turn saturation up, he will look like he has a horrible sunburn / Thanos / Avatar / Hulk / whatever. I'm actually not going to mess with the hue that much, but what I'm going to do is drop the saturation way down. 0, no, or minus 100, no, that's too much. So I want a little bit of color, but not too much. Okay, so what I'm trying to do in a perfect world, what I'm trying to do is pause, unpause. Okay, so again, what I'm doing here is I want to make his head match the color of the rock. Okay, the rock in this case, it's not totally gray. There actually is some color in it, and it has a slightly yellow tint to it, a slight yellowish tint. So I'm going to set the saturation to a level where most of the color disappears, but there's still a little bit of color. So in this case, it's about like minus 80 or so. In other words, about like 80% of the color is taken out. Then I can adjust the hue, and I want to make that hue so that it matches the color of the rock nearby. So like about right there. Okay, so I'm trying to match the color of this to the color of this. And that's it. Easy. Let's do Ginsberg. I'm going to go to RBG. Okay. I'm going to click Adjustment Layer, Hue Saturation. Okay, again, it messes up my texture. Don't worry. Right-click my Hue Saturation layer and say Clipping Mask. Okay, now as I adjust my saturation, it is affecting only her layer. Okay, so that's what I'm looking for. So I'm going to drop the saturation down again. It's going to be probably different from the other picture because they're different pictures, they're different faces, they're different skin color. They're going to look different. But generally around -80 or so is about right. And again, adjust the hue until it matches the color of the rock nearby, like so. Okay, she was actually fairly close to the rock color already without a whole lot of adjustment. Let's do Joe Exotic. Okay, adjustment layer, hue saturation, clipping mask again, and then saturation down, hue adjusted. You have to kind of use your eyeballs as the best judge for these color adjustments. It's going to be a little bit different with every face. It's going to be a little bit different depending on what texture you chose. Yeah, so that's not bad. So these guys look decent. Now, let's do the hardest one. MJ, being a dark-skinned gentleman, his face is going to look different from the rock color. Okay, so this is going to require a couple of layers to get it right. Okay, so hue saturation. Again, clipping mask. I'm going to take the saturation and drop it way down. Okay, and then adjust the hue until again it's sort of that slightly yellowish tint that we see on the rocks. Okay. Now the tricky part is the light and dark. So I'm going to adjust Joe Exotic and Ruth Bader Ginsburg's light and dark as well. Her hair looks wrong. Actually, they all look wrong. This doesn't look right on Fauci. This doesn't look right on Ginsburg. This doesn't look right on Joe Exotic. So I'm going to be adjusting the levels of all of those layers to get the faces to look more rock-like. So for MJ, I'm going to do levels. And again, it's going to mess up my whole picture. Clipping mask puts it right back the way it should be. Okay? So you'll see now that I have on MJ, I have a texture layer, I have a hue saturation layer, and I have a levels layer. For levels, very simply, all I need to do is adjust this black point. That is going to make the darkest part of that layer be a shade of gray instead of being a darker black shade. Okay, so as I lighten that tone a little bit, it's adjusting the the darkest areas of the head, the shadows on his face. To adjust the overall, so this is affecting only the darkest areas. Okay, to adjust the overall tonality, I'm going to adjust this middle point. Okay, so I want to adjust it so that it still looks like MJ. You know, I want it to look like MJ, but I want it to look like it's MJ made of stone. Okay, so I'm going to pull this point over a little bit. I'm going to pull this point over a little bit, and then I'm going to adjust the midpoint and the highlight, like so. And that's pretty good. Okay, so let me go back to his original face. So there's his original face. Here's his texture layer. Here's his color layer, which just takes the saturation out of his color. Okay, and then here is the levels adjustment, which gets him closer to a rock appearance as opposed to a flesh appearance. Okay, I'm going to do Joe Exotic and the others as well. So here's my RBG layer. Her hair is way too dark. It should not be that black, not at all. You'll see these guys, you know, Jefferson very famously had dark red hair, you know, but when he's a stone sculpture, it looks like stone regardless. So levels, clipping mask. Okay, so now I know I'm adjusting only her. Okay, again, same technique I use with MJ. I'm going to grab this black. Again, make sure you're using the lower one here, not the upper one. So this lower one limits what the darkest part can be. Okay, so that's better. Probably go a little darker. And then to adjust the overall tone, which now looks too light, I'm going to adjust this middle point until I get it looking appropriately stone-like. Okay, there you go. So here it is with no adjustment. Here it is with the levels adjustment. Okay, let's do it also on Tiger King. Adjustment, levels, clipping mask. Okay, grab the black point, pull it over. You'll see it affects mostly his sunglasses because those are by far the darkest part of his head. So I'm trying to get it so the sunglasses don't look too weird. So I'm pulling this over pretty far. And then I'm going to adjust the upper values to get just the right look. This Joe Exotic is actually pretty difficult. Takes quite a bit of tweaking to get it just right, but we shall persevere. There you go. So there's my Joe Exotic. I actually might want to adjust his color just a little bit. Now is a great time to mention the best thing about adjustment layers is that you can change them anytime you want. Okay, I can come back later and decide, you know, I don't really like that color on Dr. Fauci, so I can come back to his hue saturation layer and I can adjust it later on. Okay, I can decide that this RBG here looks a little bit too red. Go back to her hue saturation and tweak it to get exactly the color that you want. If I think Joe Exotic here is a little bit too light, I can adjust his midpoint here to get his tone a little bit darker. So folks, there you have it. Oh, I forgot Fauci. Here we go. One more. Levels. Clipping mask. Pull that black point over a bit. Adjust the midpoint. And there you have it. If you have problems, which I fully expect some people will have, there's a lot of steps here. There's a lot of things to execute correctly. But once you get the gist of it, it's really quite simple. If you get stuck, rewind the video, go back to the beginning, watch what I did on that first head or on the MJ head, particularly if you're doing a person that has darker skin. That will be very helpful. If you get stuck, shoot me an email, send me a picture showing me what your issue is, what looks weird or what looks like problematic. Take a look at my video at my layers over here. Your layers should look very similar. You should have a head with 2 or 3 layers clipped above it that are adjusting the texture and the colors. Good luck.